When I was a baby, around 9 years old, my dad played on a softball team. A typical social team, like hanging out for beers and pizza after with the guys, a family event type thing. My parents were good friends with two of the other couples, and both had young kids as well. On this occasion, the other two couples had left their kids at one of their houses, with a babysitter they were splitting. They invited my parents back to the house to have more beers that night, but I was being fussy, so my mom nixed the idea, though they would say 100% have normally returned to hang out. Well, it turned out my fussiness on that day saved our lives. When the other parents returned to the house, they walked in on a home invasion. Two men had broken in, tied up the kids, the babysitter, and her boyfriend, and were waiting for the parents. When they returned, they took the parents hostage as well and made the dads drive with them to banks and a grocery store, where one dad was manager and cleared out accounts safely. They then came back to the house and slaughtered both families, the babysitter and her boyfriend, kids included. They caught the two guys later on. My dad attended the trials and said it was the first time he had thought of supporting the death penalty. It still gives me chills to know how close we came to getting killed that day. Years ago, my now husband worked for an industrial laundry company in their head office when a PR disaster happened that also mentally screwed up a number of people. Their company collected laundry from large hospitals and medical-type businesses, for example care homes, etc., and cleaned them. You can imagine the sort of heavy-duty cleaning, bleaching, boiling, etc., needed to remove those sort of biological contaminants. One day, a laundry cart went through the usual bleaching, boiling cycle before it dropped out into a conveyor belt to be sorted for drying and pressing, when there was a horrid scream. A small newborn baby's body had been discovered tangled up amongst the sheets. It had been cooked. The laundry workers were distraught, the whole place had to be shut down, police were called, and the laundry tracked back to the hospital to discover what happened. It turns out a stillborn baby had been left in the cot, waiting to be taken down to the hospital mortuary after the parents had said their goodbyes, and covered it with a blanket. But somehow one of the nurses hadn't realized, so it was just grabbed up among all the linen out the cot, and off the bed in the delivery room, with the body bundled inside, and emptied into the laundry hamper thing. The other nurses assumed that the baby had been collected by the mortuary, and was stored awaiting at their funeral decisions. The laundry was found not to be to blame, but the parents were devastated and the hospital took a lot of flack. The poor laundry workers who discovered the body ended up being given counseling, before eventually quitting. The laundry did amend its practice to individually emptying each laundry hamper into the industrial machines, instead of just tipping them in, to stop anything like that happening again. One night, I was out at a bar with a friend I was visiting in New Rochelle, New York. We went outside for a cigarette when a car came flying past the bar. The car burned through a red light and started going up this hill that was on a curve. We watched as he veered over the double yellow and smashed head-on with another car coming from the other direction. Both cars' hind ends lifted up, then slammed down. The car that was driving correctly burst into flames. I ran inside and grabbed the fire extinguisher, then yelled to the bartender to call 911 and say there has been an accident. My friend, a few other patrons, and me ran to the cars. Now, I used to think this was a fictional trope, but I was pretty drunk before this happened, and I swear it sobered me up instantly. I tried spraying the fire, but it did nothing. The fumes and heat were awful, and all we could do was stand back. The worst part was, and this will haunt me forever, was that the woman in the burning car was screaming as she died. It was the worst sound ever. The fire department came and put the fire out. The police took us back to the bar and took statements. I found out the next day in the news that the car that was not speeding was being driven by a young woman coming home late from work. She was a block away from home, and I think she was either newly married or a new mother. The rotten motherfucker driving the other car was some rich drunk cocksucker. He lost a leg, but otherwise was physically unharmed. I have no clue if he did time, as I left to go back home a day or so later. I'm trying to find a link for the news story, but I can't, as this was maybe 6 or 7 years back. Years ago, when I was 8, my family lived in this big weird house, kind of on the edge of a small town. The school district was in the middle of a big restructuring, so even though we were only a couple grades apart, my brother and I went to different schools and took different buses. This left me as the last person to leave in the morning, and the first person to get home in the afternoon, which meant it was my job to make sure all the lights were off, and the door was locked. One morning, I noticed the basement door was open and the light was on, so before I left I turned off the light and closed the door. When I got home that afternoon, the light was on and the door was open again. I just assumed that I'd forgotten to actually take care of it when I noticed it in the morning, so I went over to turn off the light and close the door. When I got to the top of the basement stairs, I looked, and there was a big shadowy male figure towards the bottom of the staircase. I freaked out, slammed the door, and pushed a bunch of boxes against it and then went and hid in my closet. For months, I didn't tell my family, because I was positive what I had seen was a ghost, and didn't think anyone would believe me. Then about a year after that incident, my mom and her boyfriend realized that small amounts of money had been going missing for months, totaling around $800 to $900, but never more than $60 at once. So we all walked around the house with flashlights, trying to figure out how someone could have gotten in. Turns out some creep was climbing in through a small hole on the outside of the house, shimmying through a crawl space, then coming up into the house through the basement. We had the hole closed, and were now aware of the happenings. Maybe that person got that idea too, cause after that it didn't happen. Though realizing that I had been alone in the house with him on at least one occasion was one of the worst, most terrifying moments I've ever had. A relative of mine was in college and living in a small off-campus house by herself. At the time, she thought she might have had a stalker. She had gotten some strange phone calls, no one answering on the other end, heavy breathing, and that sort of thing. One night she was home alone in her bedroom studying, just her and a cat that she had recently adopted. So recent in fact that she hadn't even named the cat yet. The whole time she was studying, the cat was acting crazy. Pacing the floor, meowing constantly, and sitting right in front of her closet meowing nonstop. She was getting really annoyed and finally had enough, so she got up and went to the closet to open it for the cat. And hopefully shut him up. When she opened it there was a man sitting in her closet, and when she opened it, it startled him, so he jumped up, pushed her out of the way and bolted out of the house, literally ripping a hole in the screen door as he tore through it. She called the cops and gave a description. She had a clear look at his face. They found him and placed him under arrest. It turns out, he was also a serial offender. He had been stalking her for weeks, and broke into her house to wait in her closet, until she was asleep, at which time he would pull his mask down, and take advantage of her. Same pattern with his other victims, but she was the only one to see his face. Her testimony put him in prison. And the cat saved her.